Good evening, everyone. It's Kamal here.
I'm Anil here.
Thank you for joining in, and we think it's going to be interesting next 20 minutes. I want to ask Anil at the beginning itself, how many interviews have you gone for, Anil?
Maybe about 4, Kamal, the last 18 years. Or I think maybe 5.
Maybe you don't have enough data points, so I've at least had possibly met about 25 people whom I can call as interviewing managers so far of different kinds.
Right.
So
but this is our bread and butter. This is what we do for a living.
I know, that's what...
we experience candidates going through these phases, right? I mean, interviews, jobs.
I know you're trying to tell me that your experience is rich enough, so I respect that.
Right.
But to start with, I think there's nothing like a personal experience. When you sit there and, as a job aspirant or, you're looking for, a pleasant conversation, talking to somebody whom you call as hiring manager. So that is the interesting part, people, today, that we're going to talk you through about our own experiences. Last 2 decades that we've been in the recruitment industry, what the people who've gone for job interviews have told us, what we have personally experienced. So the next 20 minutes is a combination of that. And to draw your attention, we've called it the Unfashionable hiring manager.
So can it be said that it's the hiring manager who needs to be updated?
Maybe.
Needs to be in tune with times?
Maybe I would like to say so. I would like to call it that. Let's move to, let's say, educating, orienting the hiring manager.
Right.
And over the next 20 minutes, what we want to cover is, we all know that not everything is good there. So the things that we're going to take you through would be around what a hiring manager's mindset should be. What should he or she be doing?
Yeah. So the focus of our conversation is being taught to the hiring manager, and what he or she needs to do to enable a successful hiring event or process.
I would rather say more than a successful hiring process, I would call it as what a hiring manager should focus on, providing an experience.
Right.
Okay. So I think there is a job to be done from a experience point of view. And if we could focus on that over the next 20 minutes, I guess we've done justice to what we have put out here. These are the 6 odd pointers that we have taken from what is not good at this point of time in the hiring land.
Yeah, and what can be fixed, right? What should be fixed.
Yeah, that's what we think. And let's explore, from where we are. And let's start by asking, the terms that we use, Anil. We call people candidates. We say, we say, should we actually change into what is known as talent or job aspirant, or you are playing with words?
No, I think, Kamal, there is a need for a paradigm shift in this. Candidates are often thought about as people who are needy or who are seeking some help or a favor. But I think when we shift this paradigm to a candidate, to a talent, then you tend to look at it very differently. I think that brings about a big, paradigm shift, as I would like to think of it.
Such a simple thing, language, isn't it? But still, it's so difficult to do, And I'm sure over the next 20 minutes, you and me ourselves will struggle to say, because we've got used to the word candidate.
Yeah, we use it often on a floor.
Yeah.
But I've started to, increasingly look at it. Will it make a difference? Will it make a shift in our thinking?
I think it should, because I want to imagine myself, like recently when I went to a dentist and, the receptionist said, the patient is here. And I was like, I felt offended. And I'm sure if somebody calls me a candidate, I'll feel so if I go for an interview. And I'm out of that world today, but I'm sure it's a change that is required from a language.
Yeah.
We can say we're playing with words, but definitely I think if our mindset moves to we are meeting a talent, a job aspirant, I'm sure our own orientation while interviewing would change.
So let's examine, beginning with the shift of candidate versus talent, what can originate from this? What kind of conversation and what kind of perspectives can originate from this?
Yeah, I think, if we look at where we have to start from,
right.
We clearly see that everybody who's going to interview, the people for their teams or for their organizations, that's, they say, is actually a moment of truth from a branding perspective, what we call as employer branding. Because we know that, companies take great care when their employees meet their customers, because that's their actually most important moment of truth. But we have seen time and again that if at all there is a second or equal moment of truth, is when you get interviewed.
Right. So, there are SOPs for dealing with customers, the detailed, processes laid out. There is training of staff when they're dealing with customers. I often wonder whether the same thing happens when, people are dealing with, I call it candidates.
There you go, candidates.
But I'm talking about, really talent here, whether when they're dealing with people, whom they want to attract into the company, do they really have some standard processes? Do they have training imparted to the people? So that's really the question, Kamal.
I think what is important to examine here is, Anil, what does it cost?
Right.
Experience data points suggest that when you are actually not treating the talent or job aspirant, when I say that I'm really struggling because my mind says candidate all the time, you're actually sort of causing the ratio of people whom you're likely to join, sort of a hit, because that experience is actually causing everything. And overall, let's say most organizations today are very aggressive in hiring. They say we're going to ramp up by thousands, hundreds together. And there is a necessity for the organization to ensure that the good talent they meet join them.
Right.
And somewhere I think the leakage that we are referring to here actually happens because the interview process breaks down many of these aspects.
Right.
And eventually it reduces joining ratio. And we hear, most of the employers complaining that, hey, look, the ratio of people coming after the interview to the next round is reducing. People after interview who are taking the offer is reducing. People who are taking the offer and joining is reducing. So they think there is something wrong with the people or the talent, the job aspirants, or they're complaining to the HR, talent acquisition, the recruitment agencies, saying that something is broken there.
Right.
But I would like to point out that what is broken is actually how the hiring manager behaves.
Absolutely.
In an interview process.
Absolutely. But it's a pleasant surprise, Kamal. Today, at least you're hearing some of the voices from the HR community where they're talking about treating talent as they're treating customers. You tend to pamper customers. You're sensitive when you're dealing with customers. So the same orientation needs to be brought when you're dealing with talent that you want to hire.
Yeah, but I know that mindset is important to examine, Anil, because we know that studies have shown very clearly from an employer branding perspective, if you look at your own corporate identity, reputation, they say at the end of it, your proposition gets defined by the experience and engagement of the person who comes to the job interview.
Right.
And they're saying that 83% of the candidate disliked a company or a role after negative interview experience,
Right.
Time and again. And this is all out there. We are not saying it for the first time, but still, this is becoming an ongoing challenge, and I'm not really sure whether this is seen as a branding challenge as much as we are touting it to be.
Right. And I don't know how many companies are doing surveys of their, candidates or talent who are actually exploring opportunities with them, whether they are listening to their voices, their opinions, their feedback. Have you come across any company that, did call it a candidate survey?
No, I did, Anil. In fact, we were doing some work with Citibank a couple of years ago, and I saw that they were actually every 6 months asking for, people who attended for job interviews, what was their experience.
Right.
Long ago, almost a decade ago, when we were doing work for HSBC,
right.
When they were new to India, they were doing surveys about what was the experience, and they were very particular. They were asking what in each step, how did a job aspirant actually experience the hiring process?
Right. Were they fair? Were they transparent? Did the recruitment process happen in a timely manner? Did somebody get back to them? So all of these things, I'm sure, I was also part of that project. So I know that, that's how we did really take the company did take it very seriously, and they would moderate their process, right? They would moderate their recruiting process. So that the candidates get the best experience. And not only that, the candidates who even did not get the jobs went on to talking about good things about this company, and they got a more inflow of candidates.
So where does it all start, Anil? In terms of if we have to define that this is what a hiring manager needs to do, where does it start? So one of the things, like, they always say there's a famous thing about it takes two to tango, but I think for the two to happen, it starts with the hiring manager.
Right.
Do they treat the job aspirants as one level down? I don't know, that's a kind of a mindset that generally exists. I won't say all the time, but more often we realize that, it's sort of starts with that, the mindset.
Well, nobody says that openly, Kamal, but then in the actions that follow, clients, many of our clients say that they're very serious about, creating that brand, that aura for candidates. But it's really in the action that they take for, after the candidate is meeting the, client, then you exactly experience this. I think there's a lot to be, desired in this.
So where did it all start from? Like they say that, this obviously, recruitment is a term, that we derived from the military, where they say, I recruit you.
Yeah.
So those days, obviously, you pick people whom you wanted. So it came from that superiority, kind of a very, very hierarchical mindset that, that I recruit you.
Yeah.
And things like, what are the habits which you think are irritating,
Well, the most elementary things like showing up late, coming unprepared, and you ask a question to the candidate saying that, tell me something about yourself.
But I thought that's a cool question.
No, but this is to camouflage the person's underpreparedness in the interview process. So then you let the candidate speak and then you try to catch up, in the whole process, isn't it?
I know, but
have you ever asked people this question? Tell me something about yourself. I've never heard of this.
I have done in the past. So I thought it was one way to allow the candidate articulate. See, I'm still using the word candidate, and already 5 times we have used it already.
But then, this is a very stereotyped question, Kamal, and many people prepare very creative answers to it. So if you really go down this path of asking this question, you can expect some very, very rehearsed, responses. Will it really help you in your recruitment process, the question?
I don't know, but I've been there, so I can't say I've never asked that question.
Right.
But I think the most put off thing is, like, look, having a resume in the hand and actually asking, line by line, taking okay, what did you do here? 92 to 96, what did you do? Kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I guess those things are still in vogue.
Yeah, you're reminding the candidate, this is an interview. This is an interview. I mean, you're going on saying this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think things like, putting people on stress interviews, so asking questions which are, let's say, I've been there, people actually said, oh, you did that in sales? I don't think so. And it was like intimidating, and I've sat there before because I was desperate for those jobs and I felt this guy is running me down. So the power play, which is there in the interview, I think still they exist. And of course, this thing of, don't you know who I am? I've done the following things, kind of self-appreciations.
Absolutely.
And like somebody told me, if you're putting people in a group and saying, let's say having a bunch of techies around and saying, okay, let's do a group discussion, because you want to process them in one go.
Right. So I know companies do use some of these outdated tools and techniques to even evaluate candidates even today.
It's not outdated, Anil. The people, it's still in fashion.
No, but they may not be relevant, or they may not even understand why they're using these tests, right? They're just using it because somebody did it in the past. So they just continue the same process.
Yeah, but I think I want to arrive at something which is very interesting. And I think this is a matrix which I think is worth exploring.
Yeah.
As to, if there are, let's say, 3 situations in terms of how we go about interviewing people. There's one thing about, one box, if we had to, focus on would be, let's say, where we want to woo people, when we want to court people and hire them.
Right.
Is there a certain way that we go about it? Second is, if you are in the evaluating testing mode, which most of us are, I think that bulk of the interviews fall into that category.
Right.
And the last, but obviously, it's not the best one, but I think we've experienced it before, where we stump the, job aspirant.
Yeah.
So I want to start with the wooing and courting part.
Yeah. So the first one, of course, is, what mindset you go with it, for the interview, the process, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to be on a mode of sharing about your context, company's context, what this job role entails, though you would have shared a job description. It's good to bring back, to focus what this job is all about, what is the immediate mandate, and also about appreciating some of the candidate's experiences, that he or she brings. And then, of course, offering a listening to the candidate. This is the most important thing. And often, small things are missed out.
This is basically kind of a desperate hiring, isn't it? You want the candidate, or that's number 7, we're using candidate.
Yeah.
You want the person to be on board at any cost.
Absolutely.
So you sort of engage with the person, you listen to them, you have a dialogue, you manage the time well, you turn up on time, ensure that you end the interview on time, you're prepared, you read the resume before, and you sort of show an engagement during the entire process. So that means on the other side of it, you're desperate to hire the person. So you do all the right things to show that, you are important and you are, the best person to work with.
Yeah.
But most often we see the evaluating testing mode in that that's where bulk of the interviews fall, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And then you're trying to be on a probing sort of mode. You challenge you contest some of the things that the candidate is saying. You ask for evidence in terms of looking from the past experiences, whether the person really has done these things. And but you also respond to some queries that the candidate may have. So it's good. I mean, this is not really a bad way, but then most of the mid-level, entry-level jobs could be, people may be using this approach.
Yeah, so, you say you're going with the open mind, but most of the time you're in a validation mode.
Yeah.
And bulk of the questions are through or Q&A mode. And actually you're trying to benchmark against whatever is there, So half of the time, I think this falls more like an interrogation.
Right.
That's how I look at it,
Right.
But I like the stumping, process where, you come one up, you condescend the job aspirant. You're always saying, this is what I did. Don't you know who I am? Listen to me. And mostly it's unstructured. You're on this side of the pendulum, suddenly you swing there. So by the time the job aspirant wants to engage with you, you are on some other pedestal. And I've been there, where there has been strong intimidation with arguments. When I left Eli Lilly as an area manager, I went for an interview with another pharma company. Mm-hmm. And of course, they made me wait forever. Mm-hmm. And finally, when they called me in, the regional manager was interviewing us for the area manager role. And he asked me something. I said, yeah, we were selling these drugs and I was the topper in this. He said, hey, how can you be? And he called another colleague of his and said, hey, look, this guy claims that, he was the topper in this drug. He said, no, it cannot be. We are the market leaders there. And, that was for me plain right intimidation. And they started arguing with me. I didn't know whether my candidature was based on that or something else.
Did you get the job?
I walked away. I never called back. Those were not the days of emails. And I didn't even call back to figure out what was happening. I didn't even stay back for the next round of interview. In fact, they had one more round.
Yeah, even in the tech world, this tends to happen, Kamal, that a bright techie would come up and ask a very smart question, which nobody has answers to. And he feels like, he has just, the ego that nobody could answer this question. But is that really effective?
I don't know, but we're dealing with human beings, and we all have our own biases when we get into that space, and that mindset of I'm one up actually causes all this.
Absolutely. So this is a representation of
very clearly. I think most of the interviews fall here. I think it's interrogation. Because that's to do with the mindset of I am interviewing you. Mm-hmm. I wish there are more conversations, that can happen, and I think it starts with the mindset. Anil. In my view, people don't see themselves really like a brand custodian.
Right. So I think the difference is building the trust, Kamal, in the process. When the candidate comes in, I think the most important aspect is that can you build trust so that the candidate feels at home, and then you're likely to get very honest responses to the questions that you may have.
No, absolutely. But, it is a difficult ask. But I've seen as the conversations are, many of the C-level interviews that I have been and I've been part of, I've seen they move more towards the conversation mode. Every time there's an interrogation mode there, the conversation breaks down and none of the job aspirants move forward. So I think in the entry and mid-level, I wish we take the hat off, I'm the job provider, and make, especially in the millennial world, if we can make the connection, conversations will definitely happen.
Absolutely. So here we have a checklist of things to do, and
for me, I have been part of interviews where I think many of these things were there, especially when I went for my interview with Kelly Services as MD. But of course, C-level interviews, like we said earlier, can be a little more, different than when people are interviewing hundreds and thousands of people to select for their companies, and clearly that's where things go out of context and all the wrong things happen.
Right.
I think with the setting the right place, very clearly. When I went for the interview in Singapore, I realized that they had set up a separate floor for us to meet. Different people were coming on time. They knew who I was. Nobody walked in with the CV. Very clearly, the coffee is coming on time. or whether somebody was there taking me for lunch. Yeah, they were wooing me, in a way I felt like that. They can say so.
Right.
And of course, they got into the depth of things. They asked me numbers, how would I turn around India? There was a definite plan they asked me for. Of course, there was psychometric testing. There was a gentleman from PDI who interviewed me. They ran me through a Hawkins test. And they looked through various schedules of what I should, go after, as an ideal CEO would do tomorrow. Clearly, I think I could see the senior most members actually coming and dropping me off to the lift. And next day, when I hit back, I saw that, the fares that I had incurred to reach there and all was in my bag.
Right.
That was like perfect. And somebody called me to say, we will get back in 2 days' time. And I got a call in 2 days'
So
time.
It's very demanding, but very well organized.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, nobody picked up the phone, as they're talking to me, which is for me the most irritating factor, which all the job aspirants go through, that they'll say there's a busy call coming. So something is more important than you. That I think is the last thing you would say to somebody who's sitting in front of you whom you want to hire.
Right. So we have a few questions that we received. So we could quickly go over and we have another 5 minutes. So yeah, one of the candidates asked us whether it's a good idea to be open-minded. Whether the interviewer also will be open-minded. We can't say that. We can't guess that. But I was asking myself, is there a choice but to be open-minded?
Yeah, you really don't have a choice, because you generally go thinking that, this is going to be, an open conversation, but you really don't have a choice in, how this can happen. Because like we said, the interviews today are nothing but platforms for the hiring managers. So what they do is decides the tone of the conversation.
Sure. So there's another question, about why grades are important in a job interview. Well, there are many reasons. Companies have standards to, say that below so much of percentage in your engineering graduation, they simply won't consider. But really, this is a problem of plenty, maybe, Kamal. Only when the talent pool is really vast, then you have all these filters.
Absolutely. It's a supply-demand problem. I've asked even the CEOs of large IT services companies. They said, look, when you have thousands of people applying, we want a filter. So honestly, everybody knows that skills eventually matter. But I think more at an entry level, these grades come into play. And I don't see it going away at all.
Right. So there's another question around, do companies do training programs for the people who interview in their company? Well, there's a good question.
Absolutely. I think in my first company that I worked, Ilalili, they used to make the HR guys even travel to the field with the territory managers. So they used to go spend the entire day, meet all the doctors, chemists, and so that in their own hiring process, they are able to relate to what people can do. I thought that was the best way to sort of induct HR people to the field, and that's the best way you get a induction to the.
I've noticed, Kamal, some of the companies, these few multinational companies, I've seen that they even have grade accredited assessors in the company, and only they conduct interviews. So they are very well trained. They know how to deal with candidates in a very sensitive and a very courteous way. So I have noticed that some of the companies have done it, but I wish many more companies would do it.
I would like to believe it should be like going and meeting a customer. Whenever we're taking a newcomer to a customer, we always accompany the colleague.
Yeah.
Right? As to say, this is how we interact with the customer. Why can't we do the same while we are interviewing people who are prospective employees of tomorrow? Why can't we sit for a first few interviews saying, this is how we interview in Xpheno? Let's say we could do that. I think that'll be the best induction.
So the last question is, amongst us, who's an unfashionable, hiring person? I think this is a trick question, Kamal. You should avoid it.
You should avoid it. You tell me, who are you? You are unfashionable or a fashionable guy?
I would like to think I'm certainly fashionable. I've evolved over the years.
Okay.
Yeah, but I may have been unfashionable at some point in my time. My career. Sure.
For me, I would say like which side of the bed I got up that day. But jokes apart, I think I've been unfashionable. If you call putting somebody under a stress or trying to be judgmental in the interview, having an opinion, pushing them, because I've been in sales and interviewed a lot of people in sales, and I always felt it's good to put people under the pump and see how they react. I've done that, but I don't think it's the right methodology. But I've done that before. But most of my conversations now is about how people think. And I tend to do it more on the conversation side, but I do ask tough questions without sort of indignifying them. But I think for the longest period of time, I've been also unfashionable. So I have to admit that.
Yeah. So I think that brings us to the end of our conversation. It was a very interesting and fun conversation, Kamal.
Thank you. So we just had to deploy what we have learned over the last 2 decades, I guess. Thank you all for logging in today. And till next time, see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.